So, today we're going to work a little bit more with inputs and the animation. So let's go directly on the input handler, and about here, let's go and create a new float, and we're going to call this B timer, and we'll need one for the right trigger and the left trigger. Timer, oops, yeah, should be a float. Let's zoom in a bit. But we'll probably utilize this a little bit later in the future, but let's just make this one, at least for now. So, if RT timer, if P input, okay, RT timer plus R delta or decimal, we want R delta. And after we have finished everything in the update, okay, we still have updated our states, we have our fixed tick, and yeah, the camera manager shouldn't really matter. We're going to do a check if B input is false, then we're going to do B timer to be 0. Okay, so the reason for this is when we are actually pressing the input, we're going to check if B input is greater than and timer, and B timer is greater than 0.1. Let's go with yeah, this is probably too small. Let's go with 0.5 for starters. Then you're going to start running. Otherwise, let's close this, and let's say if we might need to change this also a little bit. We'll see. Let's check if this plays. Okay, and it doesn't. Yes. Let's see if we, oops, yeah, that's why it doesn't, because we want to add on the B timer. Let's make sure we also have the correct, yeah, it's the correct one. Let's see. Okay, so we have a delay of 0.5. So let's close this. And in here we're going to do if B input is false and B timer is greater than 0 and B timer is lower than 0.5. Okay, then we're going to do states.roll input to true. However, we still want to do this only for one frame. So on fixed update, after we have done all of this, we will say if states roll input will be false. Okay, so this will run after we have updated or the tick of our own states. So it will only serve as a button. Let's try this. We are sprinting, and if I'm pressing it down, or exactly like Dark Souls, we are doing our rolls. But if we hold it down, then we are sprinting just fine. I see we have a little bit of problem if we don't press the if we leave the run button, then it basically just stops. So we can also do if states.run let's try run resetting it every frame, and if everything is correct, this will be updating it in here. Okay, so as you can see, we're starting to get a lot of code, so let's encapsulate it. Let's call this reset. Let's call it reset input and states. So our update stays a little bit cleaner. Okay, a little bit cleaner way might be to do this in here after the actual update and not in fixed update, but we'll see if we notice any weird behaviors like the running not closing. We're going to add it back to the fixed update. Let's try it one more time. Okay, it runs exactly as it should, and we can also roll. Okay, so let's see a few more other stuff. Let's go to the fun stuff. So we have our controller, and basically, as in Dark Souls, every weapon you have or don't have, it will give you a few, let's just call them animations, or a better term to call them will be actions. So when you are equipped with an item or a weapon, when you are pressing either the left bumper or the right bumper or the triggers, then it's going to play you a different action, and everything depending on what you have equipped. Okay, you have parry, you have other stuff. Depending what you have in general, it's going to do something completely different. So let's work and create a framework just for that. So that means we're going to have slots. Well, let's call them slots. It's not true slots, but we will be able to basically change actions depending on what we're passing. So let's create that for now. It's going to be just the framework for right now, but in the future we're going to change it. So let's call this action manager. Let's open it up. Let's write namespaces. We don't need any of the updates or starts. I think it's better if we just handle it from the state manager. And let's start creating our new class. We want this to be serializable. Let's call this public class action. For each action, there's going to be a reaction, but not really. We're going to need an input, and we can call this action input. Okay, let's see if we actually need, just in case I forgot that I've added what I wanted. Okay, I haven't added, so we're good. Input manager, I see, yeah, we're fine. So the inputs: right bumper, left trigger, right, or right trigger, left trigger, and you can have your, not the Y, since it's pretty much set what the Y is doing, and I think it's the X button. And the other thing that could change, I think it will be the sorcery, which will also be on A, if I'm not mistaken. But we don't want this right now. Let's just go with these two, these four. Immediately on the action manager, what we need is something to return us the action input depending on what key we pressed. Action input and get action. And what should we actually be passing? It's the state manager. We can't get this from directly the state manager, but let's go with this. We're going to start with a return value, and that's going to be action input default, which just means it's going to be the RB. And I think it's the opposite. I think it should be default action input. I forgot how it's written, apparently. Anyway, you know, it's still the same thing. Actually, let's do this. Let's have a none variable. Or not variable, entry. Okay, we'll start as none. And what we can do is basically check if states, if RB is true, then return action input RB. Let's copy paste all this a few times, or 4 times to be precise. RT, return RT, LB, return LB, and LT, return LT, and of course this will be returning R. And actually I think let's not go with none, let's delete it, let's play dangerously, and let's just remove, let's just get all this, just return the right bumper instead. Okay, so we now have an action. So in our actions we can say public action input and input. So depending on the input we have, it's going to play you this action. But for right now, let's only do public string target animation. Let's create a list. Action inputs, let's call them action slots, and we can set them up from the inspector, but let's also create a public void. Let's do an init, and what we should also do is, just in case if action slots.count is 0, or let's do it the other way, if they are not equal 0, then return. That means we have set them up in the inspector, and otherwise let's do a for, and we're going to do, we don't want action input over here, this is wrong, we want action alone, action and action. So we are doing for, we're going to create a new action, a action, a will be new action, set the input to be I as an action input, or better yet, okay, so basically this means it's going to set you these 4 things in there. and action slots dot add the we need of course to call this somewhere, and the state manager, there's no better place than the state manager. Add in inspector, public, action manager, on initialization, and let's see, action manager, get component, action manager dot init. Let's add it in our controller. For some reason we are on debug mode. We don't want debug mode. We have our state manager. Let's add our action manager. Okay, let's leave them at here. You will see if we hit play, we have our elements. So these are going to be our actions. Now, let's go with 4. Let's initialize them. LB, RT, LT. Or well, you know, there is also the other way around doing this, which should be action manager yeah, I think this should do just fine. So this is not really needed. Let's delete it. We're probably going to need a few stuff in the future though. Over there. And if we take the action manager right now, it will have all 4 of the actions like this. Alright, so let's create a target animation, as we can see. For example, on our controller, I'm going to put right bumper to have OH attack 1. Let's leave the left bumper. This one will be OH. Let's assume the OH attack 3 is the hard attack. And the left trigger, I actually have a nice animation that I know it's going to play nice. I didn't want this one, I wanted this one, which entirely by accident, yeah, it's entirely by coincidence. I'm going to put it on the left trigger. Okay, the same deal with all the rest. We're just doing a transition back to the empty override, and I'm going to change a little bit the speed, and I'll show you a little nice trick for this, which is going to be a game changer. Okay, and I'm just going to call this party. So let's utilize all this. In our action manager, get action, we're going to say public action. We should probably call this get action input and call this one get action. And we're going to need the state manager. You can of course store the state manager in here as well, but you know, doesn't really make much of a difference. And we should also do action, find action, or let's call this get action entry, and we can say we're going the action input, let's call this input, and do a for loop action slots, or get action slot, this one, get action, this one. Action slots dot count, and of course if action slot I dot input is the same as our input, then return action slots I, otherwise return null. Okay, and the other thing we could do, because we are using the constructor in here, and it basically just makes the for, you know, this in the right order, you could just do return action slots input and cast it as an integer first. Okay, since we are creating this with a constructor, but the problem with this is that if we change the order, like by an accident, or you know, you want to troll somebody and you change the number of this, or you have more action slots, because I can't just go and add duplicate array element, I can add new elements to this, then this will give you troubles. So, you know, we can spend a little bit more performance, although, you know, it's also 4 entries and you can add more. So get action. So to get the action slot, we're going to first need to find the action input, which will be, let's call this a input, and get action input and pass the state manager. After that we want our action, or you can do the return action input, not return, get action and pass the action input. Okay, and this will return us the actual slot. So on our state manager, where we have our attacks, as you can see, fixed. If we're not in action, if we can't move, let's see, target speed, target deal, so handle movement animations, detect action. Okay, instead of having all of this, which we don't need right now, and that's why we don't want a none, because we have it. So what we can do is, instead of having all of this, we can say target, no, come on, action, action, let's call it slot, and then do action manager, get action slot, pass this, if slot is null, return, which it should probably never be, otherwise target anim dot be slot dot target animation. Okay, and we also have, if the target animation is null, then do nothing, go back. So just like this, just as simple as this, as you can see, hit game. Okay, right trigger. We wrote one animation, we wrote it wrong. Oh, it's attack, there should be 2s, like this. Now it works. And if I press the left trigger, okay, somebody's crying. So with this, you can see that we have also created the base, which is going to work later with our inventory and stuff like that. And it's also a really nice start. So even if I want to change something, if I have different, how you call it, you know, different weapons and stuff like that, I will only need to change what these actions do. And for the most part, we don't even need to change the Of course, the inputs are going to stay the same, but the animations are going to do the rest. Now, there is one issue that comes from this, and that is when we are two-handing, we're still playing the first animations. So we need to fix this. Let's fix the name, this one over here. So, and to fix that, we're going to start creating a little bit of inventory. It's not going to be a full-on inventory in this part, but it's going to be something that we can work with. So let's call this inventory manager, and maybe it should be best if we keep this separate from the other. So if we need to use it in another series, you know, we can just drag and drop it for the most part. Actually, yeah, we wouldn't be able to drag and drop it, so because it's going to have a lot of stuff just for this type of game. So let's just go with this. Let's close this. So we have our class. Let's also do a void init, although we're not going to need it for right now. And we're also going to need a new thing, a new class, public class. Let's call this item. We can go with item or we can go with weapon, I believe. Let's go with weapon. And if we need it, then we're going to make it as, you know, start doing inheritance and stuff like that. Public weapon, I'm just going to call this current weapon. So in here, what we can do is do public list action, and we're going to call this action. And we can also do public list action two-handed actions. Okay, I hope you're getting where I'm going with this. So let's go on our state manager, and it is, and over here, hide inspector, public inventory manager. Okay, these two will play bigger roles later. For right now, we're only seeing the base idea behind them. Okay, so I want to actually initialize my inventory manager first. First down from the action manager, and you'll see why. Inventory manager init. Okay, of course for right now they are empty, but on the action manager what we're going to do, we are going to save the states. We're going to be also calling the states, and I want this to be states. States will be string, and then for our action slots, for each action we have in our states inventory manager dot current weapon dot let's just store the weapon in here because it gets really annoying. States inventory manager current weapon. So on our current weapon, actions dot count. This can also be an array instead of a list. Just keep that in mind because you're probably not going to change them dynamically. Your actions will either be beforehand or afterhand. So for each action we have over there, then what we need to do is get our action slot, not our action slot, get our input, action input, get action input, and actually we need get action, not action input, and that will be action get, or we could do the slot, no, yeah, action is going to work. Get action, w actions I dot input. Okay. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to do. We have our action, so all we need to do is update its variables. And for right now, since we only have one, we're all going to change the target animation. So for each action, it's going to get the actions we have in this one, and it's going to assign the target animation. And so if on my item I go and only add one thing or don't add anything, it's going to play, it's either going to play that animation or stuff like that. So what I can do is basically every time I change the current weapon, it's going to have something else. So let's test it before we see the, and we forgot something. Yeah, we need to also pass the state manager in this one. Controller, let's add the inventory manager. And let's delete this and this. Delete entirely the animations. Okay, current weapon, we don't have any actions. Let's hit play. Okay, I'm pressing the buttons, nothing happens, well, except for the rolls. Okay, keep that in mind. So, the other thing what we can do over here, I'm going to add one action. I'm going to say add bumper, and I'm going to say here OA attack 1. So when I hit play, you will see that it filled the target animation in our action slots. So I can actually attack. I can add more. Of course, if we have the same input, it's going to take the first one it finds in the list. Let's go with right trigger. Now it's attack 3. And then to get array element, left trigger, parry. Let's try it again, mostly because I like the parry. Okay, we have our attacks, all our attacks. So let's also fix the two-handed on our input handler. On our update stage, stage is two-handed, handle two-handed. Okay, and right now it only does this. So let's add one more thing in here, and on our action manager, instead of doing this, instead of doing it in here, I'm just going to say public void update actions with current, or with current weapon. No need to do anything else. We're just going to do this like this. So I hope you can guess what I'm going to do next, which is public void update actions with current weapon two-handed. Maybe we should just do update actions two-handed, update actions one-handed. Let's drop this one over here. And update actions two-handed, we're doing exactly the same thing, but instead of getting our actions, we're actually getting our two-handed actions. Two-handed actions, two-handed actions. Okay, so on state manager, animation set bool is 200, and if is 200, then we're going to do action manager update actions 200, else action manager update actions 100. Save. Let's go back. Let's add 200 actions into our to our actions. So that will be right bumper. I think 200 attack 1 should do fine, and right trigger right trigger 200 attack 2 should also be fine. Let's hit play. Okay, I'm attacking, I'm doing my 100 animations, and if I switch, you'll see that I'm attacking. There is one more issue we need to fix, is that you can see this, the target animations for this one has stayed the previous what we had on the 100. So that means we can either do, and leave them empty, LT and LB, oops, not 0. We can either do this, or we can also do the same thing as in our from the script, which probably makes a little bit more sense, to be honest, to do it from the script, just in case, because you don't want to do this for all your weapons. You don't want to add any entries that don't exist by hand. Let's do it by script. So update all actions. So I'm going to just say void add all, make them empty, all slots. Just keep in mind that in the actual Dark Souls game, or maybe that we want this in the actual Dark Souls game, you don't want even if you have empty, I think it's just going to do something like there's no actual empty spaces, and I don't want to do I don't want to create new actions. I just want to get my previous actions. So that will be action A will be get action, and that will be action input. We need to cast it as an action input. To cast the eye, okay, and then we're going to say at least target anim to be null. And before we are updating any of our states, any of our actions, we're going to do empty all slots. Okay. So hit play. I should have now all 3 of my attacks in 100, and in 200 you can see that I cannot anymore parry, and if I go and switch, we have everything we want. So this becomes really nice, cool stuff. Okay, so yeah, I think I've covered everything I want to cover to this point. We still have 1,000 stuff to cover, so we'll see what we're going to focus on next. But yeah, this is a really good base to start with. So you know what to do: like, subscribe, praise the sun, and of course if you like to support me, then you can do so on Patreon, and you will also get additional rewards depending on your pledge. Okay, and the other way you can support me is of course through Gumroad, where you can get projects and everything helps to keep making even more stuff like this. So I'll see you next time.